This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Care Notes for Caregivers with Doug Wilber at Cherish Companions. And uh, Doug, you always come up with a topic that is very timely. And so I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Good. Yeah, I wanted to talk today about the vaccine and vaccines really, and maybe discuss a little bit about the pros and potential cons, I guess, of getting the vaccine and why I'm taking the position that I am, with things. I know that there's a lot of controversy on the vaccines, and here's, unfortunately, this is one of those strange situations where I remember when the virus hit last year, and one of my early thoughts is, oh, this is absolutely the worst time that we could have the crisis that we are, because it's in a political year. And unfortunately, it's going to become political. There's going to be people who are feeling one way or another because the fans will be flamed.
Right.
And it'll be really hard to see what's true and what isn't true, because people will go to a position and potentially get hardened in that position. And as it is, with the virus, that in and of itself is a problem. And then, to develop the, cures and other things for it, or preventative issues, also will get all mixed up and stuff. And so my fears unfortunately became true. I think there's been all sorts of turmoil and misinformation and people hardening in a position, and instead of having like what's going to be the right thing to do, where all sides could agree on it, I think that would have really happened in a normal year. We ended up having just confusion.
Absolutely.
And I one of the things I am getting the shots, and have gotten the first series. I'm gonna get my second actually today, which is part of the reason that I decided to do it. And it's not like this badge, oh, I got the shot, whatever. But when I decided on it, it really wasn't a heavy decision. Just looked at the literature, made sure that there really was no there, and I'm convinced that there isn't a there. That especially now we've had a lot of experience, and what we see is there's been a lot of information. They are following up on this very closely. So much more closely than, say, flu shots or other things, where the after reports aren't quite as robust as now. And this is looked under a microscope in a much bigger way than most others, in trying to see if there's a problem. I think a perfect example is when the Johnson and Johnson situation happened, and there were the blood clots that were tied in with it. It's interesting because they pulled it immediately, to make sure there was no problem. I mean, significant problem with it. And now if you notice, it's been put back on the market, and because I think they determined that the risk is very, very small for it. And so like if it was a normal vaccine or whatever, I think some of these things, first of all, wouldn't have been seen or uncovered. And number two, it probably wouldn't have pulled it as quickly, as what was happened in this case, because of the fact that it just wouldn't have been how they probably would have normally done it. And they're really erring on the side of caution, much more so. Now, just, a little bit about my background, I've worked in healthcare, my whole professional career, and I was in pharmaceuticals. So I know how careful and how studies are run and how they do certain things. And so, what seemed to happen with the vaccine is wonderfully, they were able to basically expedite the process by cutting out some of the red tape.
Sure.
But they didn't cut out the safety part of things. And I think that's important to know that with all of this, they weren't cutting the safety. They were just cutting some of the, institutional red tape means you have to wait for this and all sorts of committee delays and this and that. And so things tend to move at a kind of a glacial pace.
Right.
And what they essentially said is, let's not have those delays that seem to happen in the process that are unnecessary. Things like, it may take 3 or 4 months to get on the docket to discuss something. I think what in this case it is let's get this on the docket now. If it comes out, we'll get it on the docket. And so it wasn't the safety part that was affected. It was more the speed of things that was affected.
Exactly.
So I think again that's important because they again the Johnson & Johnson will use that. What they basically determine is a couple things. One is no matter what, you're going to have a certain number of people that are going to have something happen. You have 1 million people, and let's say of those 1 million people, you have 5 people that have a heart attack. Well, that could be significant or it might not be significant. In this case, it wasn't a heart attack, but I'll just use that as an example for any drug. And in this particular case, what you have to say is, okay, is there correlation that actually has to do with causality, that this thing caused that? So let's say you have 5 people in 100 or 1,000 or 1 million, whatever, that were to have some event happen, and in the example I'm using, a heart attack. But then you say, hey, but when we have the same pool of people and they don't get the shot, we have 5 people that get that same thing. And then in that situation, you say, okay, this happened, but it isn't necessarily with cause, of that. And then the second thing that you have to look at is, the risk, and that is maybe there is a correlation that actually has to do with the cause coming from it, but the risks are very small. So, and I'll give you an example. Drugs that are used really often, trimethoprim sulfa, the old brand name were like Bactrim, etc.
Okay.
There are a certain percentage of people that will get a skin reaction. And of those, there is a certain percentage of people that are going to get something called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, okay? And which is a really bad skin reaction. Now, it happens extremely rarely, but it does happen. But is it enough to say this drug is not a drug that should be used because of the fact that you can have it? Because people can die from Stevens-Johnson's, and Um, uh, there's and there's every drug has that type of thing that can happen, but the benefits overall are greater than that minuscule chance that someone's going to have it.
Exactly.
But let's say you do 100 million shots, you're going to have some reactions and other things. And that's within kind of the thing. And you're saying, okay, yeah, that can happen. But then when you compare it to, say, maybe the death rate of COVID, then you say, okay, this may happen this amount of time, but you're going to have 50 times or 100 times more or 1,000 times more deaths if someone gets COVID
Right.
than the chances of them getting, this particular thing. And I don't know what that ratio is. It's just kind of an example of it. So you have to weigh that into things. So all of this is to say, there are some risks for taking the vaccine. It seems to be that the risks are actually really small. And the more, even with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is the one that now everybody's afraid of, the Pfizer and the Moderna, again, there's risk with these, but it seems to have dropped down really, really significant. I mean, it's very low compared to the chances if you get it, what's going to happen. And it especially is true with people with risk factors and others where you can have it. But here's what I found with COVID is it seems to happen where people have more problems when they have risk factors. But it is a little bit random too, because I've seen people that you wouldn't expect to have big problems that are having big problems. And then there are those that have those problems or risk factors and they're not doing it. So this is a little bit random as far as how it's affecting people. And there is, again, correlation, more risk factors, more likely for that to happen. But really broadly, it is really broadly, the problems that people can have can be pretty serious and unfortunately can be lingering.
Right.
You can have these problems for a long time. I have a friend that got COVID and he young, healthy, whatever, and shortly after getting COVID ended up having a heart attack. Now, is there a connection there? I really feel strongly there is, because one of the big issues around COVID is blood clots.
Right.
So the likelihood, and it's not just me, I think in this particular case, is physicians said of a similar type of thing, and that there was likely a very, very high likelihood that this was connected to his COVID infection. And I can tell story after story, and many of us can, where people have done well, but also where people have not done well, or are dealing with the after effects of having COVID. So all of that, it made me say, yeah, I think getting the vaccine is a wise thing, because here's what my ultimate motivation is too. One is I want to live life, and I believe that this is the key for it. And then the second part is a sense of social responsibility, and that is by me doing this, you have to get to a certain percentage where, and no one really knows exactly what that percentage is, of population that has either had COVID or has had the vaccine. And once you hit that, one, the numbers start dropping down, and we're seeing that happening. And two, where you actually get what's called herd immunity.
Right.
And that's where you get to that point where it really goes away. I mean, it not only starts going down, but where it goes away. And we're not at that point in society. We really do have to get to that point. And I think that's really more on that 70, 80, maybe higher, but definitely you're going to have to get that percentage of people that either have had COVID or have had the vaccine where before you're going to get there. So
Yeah, I know when they rolled out the vaccine, my husband and I kept watching for when it would be available for us. Um,
yeah,
and my husband is diabetic, but he is totally in control with his diabetes. And uh, we actually talked to his doctor about it. We said, okay, um, should he or should he not? And his doctor said he may have more risk factors getting the shot, but without the shot, he has higher risk factors of getting COVID if he's exposed. And so we looked at it and we said, okay, then it's his choice. And of course, his choice was to have the injection. Now, I wasn't considered to have as high a risk factor as him,
yeah.
but on the second shot, he had a slight headache. Me, I was down for the count for 36 hours. But when that 36-hour time frame ended, I bounced back and I haven't felt as good as I do now. Now, maybe part of it is psychological, and that's okay. Um, I too felt that if I'm going to talk about these issues in podcasts with you and other podcasters, um, I'm not going to tell everybody that they have to have the vaccine, but I'm going to tell them why I believe in the vaccine the same way that I vaccinated my two boys when they were younger, um, because I knew what the higher risk was if they got a disease if they weren't vaccinated. Um, my only concern is, and I don't know if you saw this on the news last night, but now the news is that if you've had your vaccines and you're outside, you don't have to wear a mask.
Mhm.
And that's great. But how do I know if you've been vaccinated or not? And I'm outside with you. Um, it's just my own little thing going on.
Yeah, and here's really, and this is maybe I'm gonna get out in front of my skis a little bit on this, but um, the truth is that when you look at the vaccines, or when you look like if you've had COVID, um, that your chances of getting it are extraordinarily low. I mean, Pfizer and Moderna, 95%, okay, um, uh, uh, immunity from it. That means you are really, really unlikely. And here's the biggest thing is that even if you do get it, it's going to be probably more similar to getting the flu, the regular flu,
Sure.
than it is with the consequences. So really, they're finding that people who have the vaccine, even if they get it, they're not being hospitalized for it, like has happened, and they're not, having like the dying. I mean, the most
Right.
consequential of things. So it works. So, if someone says to me, I mean, like for me, not wearing a mask, out in public, if I'm exposed to someone, the fact is that if I'm willing to live with the risk, like I am every year, that I might get the flu,
Right.
and so there, I'm not, I have a different sense of risk when I'm dealing with something that the consequences are much more dire than your typical risk of getting the flu or other
Yeah.
things.
I'm glad you explained it that way because you're right. Once I get my flu shot, 10 days later, I'm not as worried about being around people that
Mhm.
might have it. So, yeah, I guess I could feel the same way with this. So
Yeah, and I think that you know, I think that again, this is all opinion, and but it's informed opinion.
right.
I know science, I know research. I worked in the field for a long time, so I feel a lot more confident. I've done at least enough of a deep dive based on the science that I know, and I feel pretty good about it. One thing I feel strongly is that you know, you cannot mandate people to do things. We're in a free society, and so people aren't going to be mandated, to do it. And that's, even if someone would want that, it's not going to happen. It's just with things. But I do feel like if you understand, first of all, someone has to understand the safety factor, and you have to go past the misinformation. So much of the data and information that's out there, like in memes and in links that are there, when you really dig into it, if you have any science background at all, it's completely bogus. They're not used. It's just not good. Okay. And one of the things I saw, it was funny. Someone said that the vast majority of the anti-vaccine information is coming from like 5 or 6 different sources. And when you dig up what those sources are, they're the ones that have been against every vaccine, no matter what. Okay. And so, that alone should make you kind of hesitant because that they're coming in with a bias, like a vaccine is wrong, well, we're going to oppose vaccines, as opposed to what does the science say and what are the effects. But based on that, the one thing I will say is that if it's not mandated, then you have to come to that conclusion of like, is this right? And there's a couple of things I will just say that maybe will get people thinking. Okay. One is virtually all the doctors are getting the vaccine. Okay, doctors aren't perfect, but they are a group that have a really strong science background, and the fact that it is so large that there is such a small percentage that are outliers that aren't getting the vaccine, seems to indicate to me that there's a pretty high confidence within the medical community, and especially physicians, that this is legitimate and safe. I saw some physicians early on, it took a little bit of a wait and see, and they waited and they saw, and now they've jumped in and are pretty much universally have even that group have gotten their vaccines. So that's one thing that I think should at least make people think, yeah, maybe I should look at what the data is. The deep dive in the data is good. And I know some of the people's fears is like, well, some of the information might be being suppressed. And that's not something that I think is without merit. There have been some things where information has been not allowed to come out or whatever. And shame on some of the social media companies for doing that, in the effort to do what they think is good. You still need to let information go out there. And I believe strongly that, the truth will win out eventually over the things that aren't true. And so you don't oppose falsity by eliminating that false information. You do it by producing more of the truth and more of the data and more of the information. But you can still find the data on both sides, and it's pretty strong. I mean, just my little opinion, for doing it. But my opinion is strong enough that I'm willing to put my arm out there, to get the thing, and getting the shot. Typically people are going from zero side effects to feeling rotten for a couple of days. So it is a strong reaction, and part of the reason that it's a strong reaction is this is a new virus, and so your body is reacting in a different way to the vaccine than it would have to other things. Even a flu shot, you can have some people get the flu-like symptoms or
Right.
some things, but this seems to be stronger, and it seems to be more often that people are getting it, not feeling well. But it's transient; it goes away, and then the protection seems to really be there. Because one of the fears early on was, is this going to allow people to get like a super reaction? And what we're seeing is, as they're getting exposure and other things after they've had their period of 2 weeks or whatever it is after the vaccine, that they really are getting that immunity. So they're not getting an overreaction, which was what people were fearing. They're actually getting the opposite, which is it's eliminating both their risk of getting it, and more importantly, the risk of the big things, death, hospitalization, other stuff as well. So.
And I will say that Molly from Cherished Companions, she has shared on Facebook certain things like, take care of yourself, take that vitamin C, take D3, make sure you're getting the right amount of sleep, things that we should be doing anyways to keep ourselves healthy. But but we went back and we looked at those supplements that we were taking, and we said, do we need to add anything to it? Take something away from it? Um, and I checked numerous sources, and they, you know, said exactly what she was, sharing with us. Um, and I think it helped us get through the year, but definitely got us through that vaccine period because, you know, we kept drinking the water that we needed to drink. We stayed hydrated. When we knew that we weren't feeling good, instead of pushing ourselves and going out to work. In fact, the day after, I was supposed to work and have 3 podcasts, and I just knew by midnight of that night it wasn't going to happen. And I just put a halt on it. And I said, I'm
Yeah.
just going to take the time to sit back. I'd rather, if I'm going to feel sick for a short period of time, do all the things I have to. And since we also shared that with numerous friends of ours, they've said the same thing. If it hadn't been for me upping my vitamin C and taking my magnesium, and now we're all researching now, what else do these things do for us that are good? And it's like, you know, eating differently. So,
Well,
maybe,
here,
oh,
yeah, I think that's the that's an important reminder that there are things that we can control in our own lives that make a difference, even if you were to get that. But it also affects, even things like the flu and other things that
right. Yeah.
that we can get. Yeah. So the last thing I want to just state and maybe wrap up with this is, let me give you a little bit of idea as far as what I've noticed. And again, far be it from me, I'm not telling people what to do as far as vaccine. The people that have, we're seeing a slowdown of people getting a vaccine because I think a lot of people really want it or are getting it, have gotten it, and now it's slowing down, and people are slowly but surely trying to decide, oh, now I've seen, and yeah, I think I will get it, or I'm still going to pass on it. So my thought was, to hopefully explain a little bit of things as best as I could from my perspective and understanding, so that maybe those people who are on the fence will go a certain way. But here's where I'm going to kind of finish up, and that is, we have to live life, and one of the things that I've noticed is once people have gotten their set of vaccines, whether it's the one shot with Johnson Johnson, or the shot that people, or the injection for the Pfizer or Moderna, the one thing I've noticed is it really has kind of made it so that people are breathing easier. Okay, because psychologically, having to wear a mask and having to do this for so long has really created a lot of fear and anxiety. And what I've noticed, and I think this is one of the best parts of the what I'm seeing is happening with the vaccine, is there is a sense of relief and not having this underlying fear that some people have. And so I'm meeting with many, many people. What I'm noticing is that once they have that sense of kind of like dread, or the other shoe's going to drop, goes away, and people start living their lives much more normally than before. They're doing things, they're less fearful. So there is this underlying change in that anxiety level. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people should do it, because whether they realize or not, they're living under a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's causing all sorts of pathologies in our culture. It really is. And I believe that goes away when people, or largely goes away when people get the vaccine. Or at least that's what I'm noticing, that you're not getting that kind of social anxieties and stuff like that as I'm meeting people. So
yeah, I will agree with you, because prior to getting the vaccines, I was not meeting with any of my clients one-on-one. And now that I know that either they've had their vaccine or they at least wear a mask, whatever, I am, getting together with them as needed. But on my weekend job, I work with a number of very young kids, and they all went out and got their shots when it opened up. And last week I was moving from one location to another, and I've been there for 4 years. And these kids, is it okay to hug you? And it was like, it felt good to be able to do that. Okay, I knew that they had their vaccines. I had my vaccines, and it was like, worst case scenario is maybe I'll get the sniffles tomorrow. That could have happened anytime. So those hugs really mean a lot to us.
yeah.
And it's been a year where, we've only been able to really hug the people that live within our four walls. So
Mhm.
I'm glad we
Yeah,
talked.
I've seen many older people who are like, it's really caused liberty because of the fact that, and people can say the rightness or wrongness of things. All I know is that, people weren't, even from a lot of family members, getting, the visits or the hugs or the other things. And now when you especially have like whole households that are, all that's gone, it's just, it's back to, the way things were. And, I think ultimately that's what we're after, is hopefully to get back to normalcy, and stuff. And maybe this is a way for, many of our listeners to be able to do that. So, well, I really appreciate the back and forth with this. And I know I hug the show as far as talking a fair amount, but I really needed to get it off my chest as far as try to give a little bit of a perspective. So
Enjoy the rest of your day, and go find somebody to hug. I think that'd be a good idea. Take care.
Bye-bye.